An older black man glided a polished sedan through town. "That's too nice for him," the officer declared, verdict disguised as curiosity. No request for papers, no real cause, just skin. He didn't know the driver was a state Supreme Court justice, a jurist who had once signed into law statutes the officer loosely brandished. This wasn't a routine stop. It was justice staring back at someone sworn to uphold it. What state do you live in? Could this unfold there, unnoticed, unquestioned? Monroe's morning wind cut crosswise, impatient with dawn. Storefronts slumbered beneath dusty hand-painted signs. A few trucks gnawed the quiet of a town, once boasting law and trust intertwined, words still clinging to the welcome board, now barely believed by anyone. Officer Grant Malloy rolled the new cruiser, radio low, fingertips drumming for some offbeat cue to label non-compliant. He needed no red light, speed, fumes, or database ping, just a feeling. Professional instinct, he called it. Others might say profiling. An old Lincoln drifted modestly matte black, state plate chipped, windows dim. Not neglected, just aged with dignity. It held its lane, steady, lawful, yet it unsettled Grant. He slipped behind, neither crowding nor lagging, hunter patience sharpening his gaze. In the mirror, an elderly black gentleman, gray felt hat, brown vest, posture upright, gloves precise. He tapped the wheel gently, eyes ahead, not checking mirrors. Elegant car, unwealthy look, Grant muttered. Suspicious, he decided. Lights flared. The Lincoln yielded immediately, calm, irritating control. Grant stepped out, hand resting loosely near his holster, habit more than fear, trained over countless stops of the nonconforming. The window eased down. The man's gaze, level and steady, felt like X-ray glass, not defiant, not submissive, simply seeing through him. "Morning," Grant said, voice neutral, neither warm nor cold. "Do you know why I stopped you?" The elder inclined his head. No smile, no bristle. "You have your reasons," he said. "I wouldn't presume to guess." Polite ambiguity unsettled Grant's rehearsed cadence. "Where you headed?" Grant asked, louder, volume substituting for confidence. "A farewell," the man answered, eyes forward. "Who passed?" asked Grant, feigning care. "A piece of history," the elder said. The system showed the plate clean. Calm patience irked Grant's need for leverage. "Identification," Grant requested. A slim, worn leather wallet appeared. A government card gleamed with a faded silver seal. Grant turned it in his fingers. "Never seen this," he said, half joking, probing. "Convincing forgery, maybe?" The elder nodded. "If you think so, call it in." Grant expected heat, a spark. Instead, he met unbothered steadiness, cooperation without capitulation. Punching a curtain, that's how it felt. No impact, no triumph. "Where are you from?" he pressed. "Here." "Since when?" "Before you were born." No insult, just granite-still composure. "Pop the trunk," Grant said. "Your grounds?" the elder replied. "Suspicion of something unusual." "Put that suspicion in writing?" "I haven't drafted a report yet, so a feeling," the elder concluded. Grant stepped back, authority wobbling as the exchange refused his script. He called dispatch to run the ID. "Name, Elias O. Granger." A long pause. "You mean Justice Elias Aaron Granger?" Grant's fingers stalled. That's what it reads." "Hold." Silence arrived, not empty, but heavy, like a room holding breath before consequence. A new voice, deeper, refined, colder. "Are you requesting verification for Justice Elias O. Granger?" "Yes," Grant said, throat drying. Keystrokes ticked through the line like distant hammers. No reassurance, no question, just the sound of systems aligning to a single name. Grant ended the call, control clawing back. The sky brightened, the air dense around the Lincoln. The elder sat statue still, hands proper, breath unhurried. Grant approached again, the ID between finger and thumb, testing edge and ownership, uncertain which he held. "You sure this is legitimate?" Grant asked. "It's what I have," the elder said. "Believe it or don't, your prerogative." The tone jarred Grant, not refusal, not fear, merely unwilling to perform submission. His thumb eased off the card as if it touched dust. "Step out of the vehicle," Grant ordered, steel layered over doubt. "Under which regulation?" "State policy permits exit requests on reasonable suspicion." "And your suspicion?" He had none, beyond unusual behavior. "Because I didn't meet your gaze, because I won't overcomply." "I'm cooperating," the elder said. "I simply don't surrender what isn't required." Experience, distilled, brushed Grant's edges like a key searching a lock. His responses frayed. "Open the trunk," he barked, reaching for command again. Authority seeking a foothold in thin air. Seatbelt off, the elder stepped out, upright, unhurried. "I'll open it. If you find nothing, what then?" Grant had no answer for nothing, only drills for wrongdoing. The trunk lifted, white flowers wrapped in brown paper, a folded fedora, a small engraved wooden box. He traced the box's letters. E. O. Granger. "What do you need to inspect?" the elder asked. "No weapons, no contraband, only memory." The simplicity disarmed Grant more than emptiness might have. Too solemn to ignore, too clean to contort into suspicion. "You're doing your job," the elder said, sadness like weather in his eyes. "But your job doesn't license you to misread who I am." Grant felt unmoored, overpowered not by rage, but by a presence that refused to validate his imagined authority. He lingered, staring into a trunk that had stopped being evidence and become a canvas he failed to interpret. Retreating looked like defeat. The elder closed the lid, then nodded. No surrender, no challenge, only refusal to accept what shouldn't be normalized. The nod chilled Grant because he couldn't decode it. He was accustomed to stammers, pleas or anger. Instead, unflinching quiet. He searched for a flaw to grip, found only composure, a dignity unhitched from titles, a man with nothing to prove. Grant flipped the ID again, now stalling, not scouting. Silver edges worn. "Judicial authorization," faint print beneath. "Elias O. Granger, appointed under constitutional authority." He'd seen such phrasing in televised exposés, never cradled it mid-stop. The elder gently reclaimed the card. The return felt less like handing back an ID and more like withdrawing from a courtroom he'd accidentally entered as defendant. "Where can I verify this?" Grant asked, voice lower, slower. "Over a lifetime, in conscience, and if you insist, call the state Supreme Court." Grant didn't call. He felt the warning flare not from fear, but from the man's lack of it. Throat parched, sweat cooling his spine, Grant tasted an exam with no posted questions. He had the vocabulary, but the grammar of justice slipped. A woman passed, grocery bag crinkling. Recognition widened her eyes. She stepped back to the sidewalk's edge, trembling fingers telegraphing caution. She said nothing to the elder, only fixed her gaze on Grant, watchful, measuring the inches left before irredeemable harm. "Do you need escort?" Grant asked, grasping at dignity's loose thread. "No," the elder breathed. "My road isn't for those who need escorting." It landed as a verdict, without sting, light as paper, yet heavier than statutes, removing Grant from the field entirely. The Lincoln rolled off, quiet, steady, leaving a long silence trailing like an unsigned indictment. When it turned past the brick buildings, Grant lowered his head, not in guilt exactly, but knowing the stop slipped from his control with that single nod. The sedan was gone, yet its shadow remained, hairline crack invisible until weight found it. The wind threaded his uniform seams, cooler than the temperature. Time blurred. When he re-entered the cruiser, his palm still imprinted a badge no longer his. He stared at the radio, fingers hovering. He'd type Elias O. Granger again, not for verification, but for reassurance that greatness had truly passed under his lights. He needed explanation, an anchor, anything to absolve the sense he'd desecrated something sacred. The database bloomed: portrait, title, appointment date, federal conference footage, and a 20-year-old clip, Granger speaking at a racial justice ceremony about the right to be suspected, less for living, more decently. Shame gusted through Grant like a door blown inward. He dimmed the screen, but the pull persisted. Outside, the empty street looked like a test without proctor. He stepped back out. No cars, no witnesses, where silence shifts from safety to risk. Men slip hardest when unobserved, ethics greased by solitude. He stood by the closed trunk as though something remained to find. The bouquet, the fedora, the box. Nothing dangerous. Too honest to fabricate. A voice surfaced. A man like that. Where's he going, dressed in memory? Showing off? He recoiled from himself. Grant keyed the radio first this time. Vehicle stop handled. Suspicion unclear. Subject non-cooperative, evasive language, possibly leveraging status to avoid procedure. Words compressed around his bruised ego. Name, came the reply. Elias O. Granger. Silence turned brittle, ready to cut. Did you just say Justice Elias O. Granger? The voice asked, dry. Grant dodged the question. I'm determining whether he used position to sidestep inspection. If he were ordinary, I'd have run a full trunk search. He scoffed, persuading himself he still was right. Then a question hit like a punch. Are you reporting a violation or rationalizing a bruised ego? Grant shut off the radio, knuckles whitening on the wheel. Training phrases surfaced: occupational pride, control loss reflex, legal reasoning masking powerlessness. He dismissed those as seminar jargon, not field tools. Now they mapped perfectly. The stop had become asymmetry, arrogance trained by authority, facing a man whose calm came from watching systems crumble under their own weight. Grant realized he'd never been asking questions. He walked like someone leaving an exam without knowing the mistake. He displayed attitude, used position, he'd claimed. Flimsy sand tossed into wind, pretending to steer. Silence answered. Then a woman's voice lifted from the sidewalk, trembling but unflinching. Oh God, it's him! Her disappointment cut deeper than anger. You know him? Grant snapped, trying to control the script. You don't? She asked. He signed my brother's release when nobody else dared. He saw what that courtroom refused. And you stopped him. Please, step back. Official duty, Grant said, voice softened to a plea for shred of dignity. She didn't move. He declined politics to serve at one bench, for responsibility, not power. Words turned the badge heavy. Assumptions, the ones stitched to skin and clothing, unstitched. Across the street, a young man braked his bike, lifted a phone, pressed record, aimed not at Grant, but at the elder's quiet. No filming, Grant ordered. Active scene. Not filming you, the kid said. Filming dignity. People should see calm that never needed to be. Grant drifted to the cruiser, each step weighted by an invisible indictment. Loss of public image control. He'd studied slides, never imagined it would look like unraised voices. A child asked, why'd they stop him? The mother just shook her head, louder than curses. Online, the clip spread. Captions read, stopped, not for wrongdoing, but mismatched expectations. Grant sensed the gaze shift. No longer citizen to enforcer, but audience awaiting an explanation that should never be required. The elder re-entered the Lincoln, unbothered, unhurried. Before the door closed, he glanced at Grant. No blame, no resentments. Eyes like someone examining a wound too deep for words. Grant turned away, because for the first time he recognized defeat without force, composure outranking spectacle, silence dominating narrative. The first edit, a tight 45 seconds, circulated, the elder stepping from the Lincoln, opening the trunk, hand trembling, As he placed white flowers on the lid, then facing suspicion without flinch. 200,000 views in hours. Comment sections stirred into conscience. I don't know him, one wrote, but his quiet made me ashamed. I thought this wasn't my problem. Another, this isn't just racism. It's justice insulted by indifference. A verified account, he saved my life in 91. Seeing him stop like this, I can't forgive it. A car pulled up. A nurse shouted, if a cop doesn't know who they're dealing with, they shouldn't wear the uniform. Then louder, not because he's a judge, because no one deserves that, even if he's just an old man heading to a farewell. It scraped Grant's badge. A cluster of students huddled over a phone. What'll they do? One asked. Don't know, another said, but I'll never watch a traffic stop the same. That's where change begins. Quiet sentences remapping daily life. Dignity as the metric, not mere compliance. Local news blinked live. A stop gaining attention. Subject identified as Justice Elias O. Granger, pivotal in civil rights rulings across 3 decades. No official police comment. 90 seconds. Lid lifted from a pressure chamber overdue for release. Grant stared at his hands. He received a text from his wife. You okay? He didn't answer. For the first time, okay felt misapplied. Somewhere else in a diner, a veteran's spoon stilled as he watched the clip. Bring the check, he said. I need to see him. Gratitude demanded motion. Monroe PD systems flagged unusual activity, independent journalists pinging the state judicial database, watchdogs sniffing, and the 8th Federal Judicial Circuit querying coordination files attached to Granger's portfolio. The question wasn't who he was, but why he was ever stopped. Captain Wade Ellison's alert read, urgent, verify and respond to public image concerns regarding Justice Elias O. Granger. Ellison called Grant. You stopped a living pillar, he said. Not here for your story. Get off the street. The name you touched isn't a person, it's history. Grant's grip paled his fingers. The name swallowed every consolation within the precinct whispers, right man, wrong time. Too generous. You don't stop a judge, especially Granger, and walk away untouched. National segments aired. The Justice Department confirmed the man was Justice Elias O. Granger. One commentator paced his words. No one should be suspect for failing a cop's expectation. Worse, the system forgets those it vowed to honor. Behind closed doors, a whiteboard directive. Media script. Misinterpreted incident. No confirmation. No rebuttal. No apology. A senior officer growled. No apology? I didn't serve overseas to watch the man I respect most, treated like a criminal with a record. The room hushed. Granger's name had passed beyond memos, reflecting whether the institution remembered its sworn values. High schools played the clip in civics class. What is justice? A teacher asked, if its representatives are doubted. A student stood. His gaze felt like someone who once saved the foundation, now watching it forget his name. Truth didn't require applause, only acknowledgement. Grant sat staring at his badge, waiting for it to defend him. It stayed mute. Silence of a symbol, cut sharper than accusations. Texts faded. Calls pivoted to another name. Granger's, now moving from social feeds to national headlines, pressing corners of conscience. By morning, an internal link appeared. Eyes only. Priority 1. A compilation rolled. Original video. Street cams. The bystander's words. The veteran's note. A Washington Post flash. Closing on Granger's slow motion still. Hand on flowers. Eyes making everyone feel seen. Beneath, one line bolded. Unattributed. The moment you no longer have the right not to know. Grant closed the screen, his favorite deflection. I didn't know who he was, curled into indictment. Not knowing became a choice. Choices repeated become practiced neglect. Agencies stayed silent. Civil society did not. The Coalition for Judicial Fairness declared, we don't demand dismissal, we demand remembrance. Less punitive, then profound. It named responsibility, and once responsibility is named, pretending otherwise becomes impossible. At a Boston symposium, Professor Laura Benham, who had co-drafted reforms with Granger, said negligence stops being innocent when the one harmed taught us what justice means. Outlets quoted it widely. Debate didn't spark, reflection did. This wasn't a cop versus citizen story anymore. At a Southern law school, students wrote essays. If you were Officer Grant Malloy, what would you do differently? A first year answered, I'd ask, what's your name? To remind myself names carry histories deserving proper recognition. The essay went public, quiet guidance for tomorrow. Grant wrote nothing. Only his office phone rang, calling him to a media narrative alignment meeting. Room voices smoothed to neutrality. Ellison alone broke tone. I believed process could shield us. Granger didn't need process. He is the standard, reminding us why we serve. The meeting ended, conclusionless. Grant passed his door. Lieutenant Grant Malloy, traffic enforcement. The nameplate looked unfamiliar, drained of current. He remembered Granger's eyes, opening the trunk, waiting, saying nothing, yet shrinking a room simply by being present. Grant recognized Granger's name now held a mirror to society. Why didn't we see sooner? He entered the emergency room. No accident, only a name smoldering at the heart of headlines. Ellison sat, glass trembling slightly, then slid a thin folder toward Grant. It wasn't an internal report. It was an emergency contact log bearing the state's raised seal. Priority call. Chair, Judiciary Committee. Next page. Monroe PD has stopped Justice Elias O. Granger. Visual documentation spreading. State-level directives required to prevent moral crisis. First direct contact in 20 years, Ellison said. Grant nodded, throat ash dry. Not an investigation, yet a lens no explanation could outrun. The Deputy Attorney General called, Ellison added. What are you doing to preserve trust? I had no answer. We were trained to keep emotion out of procedure, Ellison continued. But sometimes, even when procedure is followed, the outcome is morally wrong. The phone rang. Yes, yes. He turned. You're off traffic detail. Records for now. No public contact. Suspension? Grant asked. No, Ellison said. Separation from your collapse. Meanwhile, at Justice Office's aides reviewed Granger's file. Elias Orrin Granger, born 1946, appointed State Supreme Court Justice 1998, chaired federal civil procedure reforms, declined multiple federal nominations to keep the state bench. He never needed fame, someone said. He just needed not to be mistaken. The line drifted marble corridors like a quiet spell. Doors paused in their closing, as if architecture itself strained to hear a truth long starved of attention and air. The conference room door fell shut behind Grant like a period on the wrong line. Silence shifted from shield to sentence. At his new desk, no arrests, no radio, only a monitor and a front desk schedule. He sat exposed to a hallway of changed glances. At Jackson Law School, an academic symposium retitled itself overnight, Elias O. Granger, a forgotten standard. No guest of honor, just archival clips. 90s footage of Granger in crumbling courtrooms, quoting torn statutes by memory, later codified statewide. A silver-haired professor, once his researcher, addressed the packed hall. We seated him in back because he didn't perform, but he wrote the appeals that saved hundreds. Maybe we mistook silence for absence. That sentence became a headline, then a touchstone. Granger issued no statement. He refused interviews, kept reviewing clemency petitions weekly, asked about Monroe. He told a clerk, if I must explain my silence, I've already said too much. He became a symbol, order questioned without breaking, presence enough. The Federal Law Review published Elias O. Granger and the Cases That Never Made Headlines. 14 rulings shaped quietly, from a Louisiana death penalty reversal to forcing Mississippi to overhaul discrimination investigations. No pressers. He won, then stepped away, expecting society to remember. Grant read slowly. Each line nicked his old idealism. Follow the manual. Justice follows you. Granger hadn't followed. He authored frameworks. That truth exiled Grant from his safe perimeter. Evening roundtable. Veteran journalist. If Granger can be stopped, when did we drift? No one answered on air, but the question spread into boardrooms and classrooms by morning. Grant looked less like a villain and more like a cracked pane, gazes snagging, warping, reflecting what institutions ignored, excused, or neatly filed away as necessary. The oversight panel assembled, independent, state-appointed, tasked to reassess conduct through implicit bias metrics, not criminal, yet clearly consequential. Officers who knew Grant understood the silhouette. High anomaly detection rate, once celebrated, now reinterpreted. More stops? Thinner reasons, fewer records. A recipe for unmeasured harm. Media peeled back layers. A local paper ran 30,000 words. High detection or high bias selection. It showed Grant stopped people of color at 3.4 times department average, yet found fewer violations. The closing question skewered softly. Did decisiveness shield bias? Peers drifted away. A former partner told a reporter anonymously, I thought he was brave because he acted. Maybe he just never had to stop and look. The line traveled, not condemnation, but realization that trust can mirror something larger and broken. Grant issued no statements. He clocked in, clocked out. Every corridor felt mirrored. People fell silent, not hostile, just different. What haunted him wasn't words said, but words withheld, the natural quiet that follows recognition, and an unwillingness to pretend. The special review team reopened long quiet cases, once stamped insufficient evidence, body cam files missing despite policy, radio transmissions with gaps at crucial moments, old complaints, shaky handwriting from elders, reread, not dismissed, as if fresh testimony finally found oxygen. Grant parked one cloudy afternoon. Engine off, lights dead. Kids pedaled by, pedestrians flowed. Their eyes no longer feared or acknowledged the cruiser, only regarded it with a new silence, the kind belonging to people who've learned and are now watching. Public focus moved beyond Grant, ironically offering some shelter at first. But silence has pressure. Questions shifted. Who already knew? Why did they let it continue? Oil across polished tile. The inquiry spread quietly, a slick surface too late to mop. An independent newsroom published messages never sent, leaked emails among mid-level commanders from 3 years back. Malloy reacts a little fast with black folks, but outcomes aren't bad. Another, don't intervene without formal complaint. Scrubbing data kills our numbers. No exclamation points, no overt malice, just the cold blade of convenience. Administrative accomplice trended. Citizens excavated payroll records, assignments, meeting notes. Dry documents became evidence of louder guilt. Overhead boards displayed awards above names carrying unaddressed complaints like uncorrected typos in permanent ink. The hashtag signed and silent caught fire. People understood. Harm isn't always in shouted slurs, but in signatures that look tidy while quietly endorsing patterns. Footage compilations widened, history layered onto the Monroe clip, context turning isolated moment into indictment. Grant sat in records, filing the lives of strangers, each form a small story. His hands moved automatically, his mind replayed the trunk, the flowers, the box, the nod. How dignity can form a wall you can't batter, only recognize. National coverage deepened. Interviews with clerks Granger mentored. A judge recalling how Granger quietly rewrote briefs at midnight. A retired sergeant admitting policy is a floor, not a ceiling. We thought minimum compliance meant moral compliance. It doesn't. A columnist wrote, Granger reminds us institutions are built daily by choices, when to look closely, when to look away. The piece ricocheted across editorial pages. Monroe's clip wasn't an aberration. It was an X-ray revealing structural habits calcified as normal. Grant's badge remained where he left it during lunch, face down on the desk. He studied the back, numbers without narrative, and wondered when he began confusing procedure for purpose, authority for understanding, motion for movement towards something worth holding. At roll call, no one said his name. They spoke around him, a conversational cul-de-sac. He recognized a different kind of isolation, not exile, but insulation. Colleagues protecting themselves from splashback, while quietly tallying their own unchecked assumptions and near misses. A memo circulated, community listening sessions, attendance encouraged. The schedule listed church basements, school gyms, a union hall. No podiums, it read, chairs arranged in circles. Grant traced the dates and wondered if listening requires surrender more than presence. He read another piece. Symbols go silent. It argued that when public symbols refuse to speak for you, you must learn to speak to those harmed. Elegance without empathy curdles into arrogance. He felt a hollow where certainty once clicked. An internal ethics officer visited records. "We'll need your notes from the last 6 months," she said. "All of them." He gathered manila folders that suddenly looked like mirrors, thin, reflective surfaces, catching only whoever dared to lean close. The priority review listed items in urgent red, stops with missing timestamps, audio gaps, inconsistent narratives. Grant saw his own phrases, instinct, unusual behavior, non-compliant tone, stripped of authority, read like confessions of bias, laundered through official language. Ellison called Grant into his office, blinds half closed, light slicing the desk. "I can't tell you how to feel," he said, "but I can tell you what I regret. How long I mistook smooth paperwork for clean hands." Silence answered for Grant. He walked past a corkboard, flyers, Know Your Rights, workshops, a youth legal clinic, a clemency petition drive. He wondered how many faces he'd scanned as data points, not names, how many histories he'd mistaken for patterns that needed interruption. A podcast featuring former defendants surfaced. One voice, steady and tired. "I didn't fight the trunk search. I thought I was unlucky. Turns out I was part of someone's idea of what unlucky looks like." The line folded Grant inward. Emails pinged, training modules on implicit bias, procedural justice, and community harm. He clicked through slides with stock photos and overbright colors, the contrast painful against the grayscale of Monroe's clip. He kept clicking, unsure if repetition could cut deep. A sergeant lectured her recruits. "Reasonable suspicion isn't a feeling, it's an articulable fact, and bias isn't a slur, it's gravity." Grant stared at the floor tiles. Gravity had tugged him for years while he called the pull professionalism and the drift safety. In church the next Sunday, a pastor said, "Dignity isn't given by uniforms or robes, it's recognized or refused." Grant clenched a bulletin until the fold turned white. Recognizing dignity might mean rewriting the past, at least the part he authored. He pulled old citations from storage boxes, reading names aloud, softly, like prayers for unprayed moments. The stack grew, and with it, the sense that apologies, if given, must be concrete. Follow-ups, reversals, commitments that can be checked, not merely felt. A community forum filled the auditorium. No stage, only leveled chairs. A woman spoke. "My son learned to stop breathing when he saw lights." A man added, "We carry our resumes on the dashboard." Grant felt each statement land like small, undeniable verdicts. Ellison addressed the room. "We failed to understand the cost of our certainty." He didn't ask forgiveness. He asked for work, policies to narrow discretion, audits with community seats, disciplinary teeth. Applause didn't follow. Pen scratched notes. That felt like progress. Grant stood outside afterward, breathing evening air like it might change him. Nearby kids practiced bike tricks under the street lamp. A mother corrected homework on a curb. Dignity looked like ordinary life unstartled. He'd interrupted too much of that. The records office door clicked behind him the next morning. On his desk, a plain envelope. No return address. Inside, a photocopied speech from years ago. Granger's address on quiet reforms and the habit of listening longer than your certainty allows. A handwritten note. This helped me once. Maybe it helps you. No signature. Grant reread the paragraph on accountability without self-immolation. Repair as daily practice, not performance. He folded the page into his wallet, unsure whether he deserved the kindness. Ellison convened another briefing. Paper stacks, red lines, new checklists. No more unlogged stops, review triggers, camera audits, community observers. Someone muttered about morale. Ellison replied, "Morale without trust is vanity." The room quieted, men and women swallowing rough truth. A data analyst presented. Outcome disparity persists. We measured efficiency, rewarded volume. That shaped behavior. She proposed metrics tied to accuracy and harm reduction. Grant remembered calling numbers proof of merit. Numbers can be proof of momentum off a cliff. Upstairs, a city council member read a resolution. Independent oversight with subpoena power. The vote wasn't unanimous, but decisive. Afterward, a clerk whispered to Grant in the hallway, "You looked lost at the meeting." He nodded. "I'm trying not to be." A legal clinic posted Granger's archival decisions online with plain language summaries. Students annotated margins. Here he anticipates procedural abuse. Notice the remedy: narrow, practical. Grant clicked through. Each opinion was less thunderclap than tuning fork, correcting pitch patiently. He wasn't absolved by understanding, but understanding made denial impossible. He wrote 3 names on a sticky note, people he'd like to face if given the chance. He didn't know what he'd say. Maybe, "I saw you too late. I'm trying now." The department circulated a draft apology, formal, careful, circled by lawyers. Ellison returned it, plain language. The next version read shorter, clearer. "We failed Justice Granger. We failed many of you. We'll measure change where you can see and verify it." A reporter asked Grant for comment. He declined interviews, not from secrecy, but because he hadn't earned a microphone. He walked home past a mural, hands reaching toward each other across a painted street. The gap between them looked small, felt vast. Online, a teacher shared a classroom exercise. List 5 ways to honor dignity during a stop. Students wrote, ask names, explain reasons, narrate steps, accept silence, see the person. Grant saved the slide, embarrassed that such basics felt newly learned. An internal memo reassigned him to community liaison under supervision, not punishment, practice. He would schedule forums, sit in circles, take notes, deliver updates measured by external eyes. He agreed without bargaining. Accountability, once theoretical, now had calendar entries. In the State House, policy advisors cited Monroe while debating reforms. "Codify discretionary checks," one said. "Tie funding to transparent metrics," another added. "Remember Granger's playbook. Fix quietly, measure relentlessly." The room nodded, like people realizing politics can imitate patience. At lunch, Grant saw the young cyclist who'd filmed. He approached, careful. "Thank you," Grant said. The kid shrugged. "I filmed dignity." "I'm learning to see it sooner," Grant said. "I hope so," the kid replied, "because the camera shouldn't always be necessary." A neighborhood watch organizer asked Grant to attend a meeting. He arrived on time, stayed quiet, passed out pens, collected questions. He resisted the urge to answer quickly, writing each question exactly. No smoothing, no paraphrasing, letting the language remain sharp. Back at his desk, another envelope waited, this one from the veteran. "He saved me once," the note read, "by listening when I was furious. Do the same for someone who doesn't trust you yet." Grant folded it beside Granger's speech. Jackson law students published essays on first questions. "What's your name?" one wrote. "What do you need from me to feel safe?" Another, "May I explain each step before I do it?" A small liturgy forming, rituals that honor presence before procedure. A second feature explored Granger's unheralded bench memos, technical, humane, precise. He wrote for the litigant who couldn't afford a second mistake, a clerk recalled. Grant realized justice can be both exacting and merciful, not as opposites, but as alignment. Granger remained publicly silent, moving through his days. A neighbor said he still gardened early, trimming roses with quiet care. Granger's silence felt less like withdrawal and more like a bar set where others could see it without spectacle. Grant walked Monroe's streets deliberately, noticing how morning light hung on chipped signs, how the welcome board slogan read differently now. Law and trust weren't intertwined slogans. They were daily negotiations, renewed or betrayed by 1,000 tiny choices no camera catches. The records office felt lighter. He handled files with attention. He still faltered. Reflexes don't surrender overnight, but he caught himself sooner. He began asking coworkers for second eyes on decisions that felt easy. Easy, he learned, was suspicious territory. Evening news revisited Monroe with fewer graphics, more listening. The anchor closed. Change is not a statement, it is a calendar. Grant scribbled that on a sticky note, then added, and a mirror. He stuck it to his monitor frame. A battered sedan stalled near the precinct. Grant and 2 colleagues pushed it to safety. The driver, an elderly woman, thanked them, then asked, "You one of the officers from that video?" "Yes," he said. "I'm trying to do better." She nodded once. "Then start by remembering names," she said. I'm Laverne." He repeated it, Laverne, letting the syllables anchor. Names are small bridges, he realized, spanning assumptions. Bridges don't end the river. They give you a way to cross without calling it a miracle. The oversight panel released early findings: gaps in documentation, discretionary bloat, outcome disparities. Recommendations: mandatory articulation, public dashboards, community auditors, consequence ladders. The report avoided theatrics, asking instead for sustained, measurable repair. Grant felt relief and responsibility intertwine. He carried the bouquet image with him, the way grief sat in the trunk like a guest of honor. Trunks are for storage, he thought. Some hold groceries, some hold pain. Either way, you open them gently when invited, not because you can. A recruit asked Grant privately, "What did you learn?" He answered carefully, "Certainty is addictive. Ask questions anyway. Narrate your steps. Dignity isn't compliance, it's presence. Don't confuse quiet with consent, or your gut with the law." The recruit wrote it down. An op-ed by a prosecutor admitted charging decisions once relied on officer instinct. "We're revising," she wrote, "because instinct has a bias footprint." Accountability braided across roles felt new. Grant printed the piece, underlined braided, taped it inside his locker. A city muralist painted Granger's silhouette, no features, only posture, beside the words, "Seen enough." People left notes beneath: family names, case numbers, thanks, questions. Not a shrine, more a bulletin board for commitments, proof that memory can work like infrastructure. Grant stood before it, hand brushing paper edges. A teenager read aloud, "Please don't make me teach my little brother how to survive being ordinary." Grant inhaled, wanting to promise. Promises were heavy. Calendars, mirrors, meetings. He could promise those today. He drafted an email. Subject: community update. Bullets: forum dates, new audit link, body cam compliance stats, policy draft feedback survey. He set reminders, scheduled rooms, ordered chairs. Not glamorous, but shareable, checkable. The work looked like logistics, felt like atonement. He walked home under Monroe's slow neon. A bar's sign flickered. The wind was kinder. His steps no longer sought control. They sought attention. Tomorrow's list waited. So did the mirror. He would try again, without applause, with receipts. Before sleep, he reread the photocopied speech. "Listen longer than your certainty allows." He placed it on the nightstand. Outside, a siren wailed briefly, then quieted. He thought of the Lincoln's steadiness and hoped steadiness could be learned, not only admired. At dawn, he brewed coffee, and wrote 3 emails to Ellison, thanking him for plain language, to the analyst, asking for training on harm metrics, to the community organizer, requesting a standing monthly check-in. He hit send before second-guessing could dilute resolve. At work, he opened a stack of letters addressed to the department. One read, "Accountability is love in public." Another, "Please don't make this a season." He pinned them to a cork strip, a low banner that forced eyes to meet words. Later, a colleague muttered, "We're getting hammered." Grant said, "We should be measured." The colleague blinked, then nodded. Shifts happen, he thought, sentence by sentence. He returned to scheduling chairs, adding name placards this time. The smallest things sometimes open the door. A deputy AG emailed, "Thank you for the transparent updates. We expect consistency." He replied, "We're building for verification, not vibes." He meant it. He had learned the difference the hard way, how vibes can dress bias, how verification makes bias visible. He paused by the window. Monroe moved. Trucks, bikes, jackets, coffee cups. Ordinary life, the thing he'd once believed he was protecting by interruption. Now he wanted to protect it by restraint, by attention, by questions that landed like invitations, not tests. The mural's comment thread pinged. Someone posted the classroom exercise. A student wrote, "Justice starts with the first look." Grant typed nothing. He closed his laptop, picked up the forum binder, and headed out, hoping practice would keep catching up with belief. Across town, Justice Granger watered his roses. He didn't watch the segments, didn't issue a quote. He understood symbols can't do the work, only remind you where to stand. He trimmed a thorn, then another, deliberate, careful, patient as his rulings, and Monroe breathed. No declaration, no parade. Just a town making room for repair measured in chairs set out, questions written down, answers returned on time. Not closure, continuance. The kind that keeps dignity from being extraordinary and keeps authority from forgetting its place. Memos, quiet flags, and caution emails from legal floated up, shared by staff who once considered themselves replaceable parts, not deciders. One draft warned, "Monitor Malloy closely. Racial skew suspected. Recommend reassignment." It languished, unsigned, unforwarded. It sat buried in the chief counsel's drafts 2 years, like a bandage hiding rot. Asked behind closed doors why he never acted, the attorney said, "I assumed somebody else would." The line leaked, echoing like a verdict without jurors. A remix looped that excuse over a somber bed. 5 million views in 2 days. Thought someone else would became indefensible shorthand. The Law Enforcement Guild polled staff. Numbers cracked like ice underfoot, spreading faster than anyone could manage. 72% admitted noticing or suspecting misconduct, yet felt unauthorized to speak. Publication deepened outrage. Few believed in bad apples anymore. Focus widened to barrels, shelves, the warehouse. A meme went viral, cracked concrete captioned, "No one broke it, everyone stepped past." Grant Malloy wasn't the center now. He'd been removed from the blast zone, not absolved, simply eclipsed. The lens widened to the machinery that trained him, promoted him, praised numbers, and never demanded a real look at consequences. The Federal Observer headline blazed, "Silence isn't neutral, it's chosen." They listed 35 mirrored cases in 5 years, disciplined for bias. 2, not 15, not 35, 2. The figures traveled like indictments, colder than slogans or speeches. The closer, "Not all who act wrongly are villains. Any who stay silent aren't innocent." At Monroe PD, a closed-door session gathered. No cameras, no transcript. A veteran stood and pierced the room with honesty, sharpened by time. "I sent 2 emails," he said. "I knew Malloy had issues. I protected my peer review score. That's on me." No applause, no rebuttal, just fog-thick quiet settling over everything the department once marketed as efficient. Those who knew and chose blindness began to shake, not fearing punishment, but realizing doors they'd hoped would elevate them had rusted shut. No locks required. Refusal to look became its own barricade that no title could pry open. No agenda line bore his name, no invite, no reserved chair. Yet, exactly at gavel's strike, a man in charcoal coat with pencil and notebook entered the state hearing on law enforcement standards, walking like someone whose rulings already preceded him. Justice Elias O. Granger asked nobody for directions, skimmed no seating chart, skipped reception desks. He moved past murmuring officials, turned left along stone tile, and chose the fifth row from the back, by the exit, neither honored dais nor press bench. Within minutes, no one dared suggest he didn't belong. The chamber's air recalibrated. Talking points slowed, eyes ticked rearward, and Granger's pencil kept steady time, like a metronome reminding everyone the score would be judged differently today. No introduction named him. Still, the presiding officer paused twice when his gaze crossed that back row. It wasn't celebrity, it was conscience seated. Authority once vested in him, dignity once denied him, now weighing the room's every word. A young delegate, first forum, rose after polished riffs. "I don't have data or a grand plan," he said, "but one person here kept my father in law school because of one sentence overheard in 1999. The chamber turned. Granger didn't. He kept writing, compact, methodical, like he was recording a hearing without a judge, but with all testimony needed for a verdict of the soul. The room caught itself holding breath mid-argument. A reporter reached to tweet, but froze as the State House stream flashed an odd caption. The room turns. One man hasn't spoken. 42 sit straighter. No source, no hashtag. Yet syndication spread. Silence needs no statement. Later, a delegate stood. "I clerked for Justice Granger. He didn't teach me how to win. He taught me how not to win and still keep honor. Justice doesn't demand the floor. It asks to be seen." The line never made official minutes, but crawled TV tickers nationwide as a question. Since when do we seat a state Supreme Court justice in back and feel like we're the ones on trial? Law schools printed it on shirts, black letters, white cotton. Justice doesn't need to speak. It needs to be seen. At ethics dialogues, cameras drifted from panels to rows of silent shirts, messages carried between shoulder blades louder than podiums and press kits. 3 hours. Granger said nothing. No nods, no frowns. A rear camera caught one moment. A young lawyer rose to defend a procedural dodge. His gaze met hers. She sat. Later, "I wouldn't defend what I don't believe, especially before him." The pencil scratched on. Fragmented notes no one would read. When adjournment landed, Granger closed the notebook, left unescorted, unimpeded. The chair turned to the chamber. "Maybe policy won't change today." Posture did. Someone in back made us look backward. For the first time in years, Elias O. Granger left as he'd entered, wordless. Yet behind him, an entire hall sat taller and measured their justifications against something that no longer felt appropriate for the moment or the future. Meanwhile, miles away, Grant Malloy sat in a tiny TV studio. No audience, no handler. A young producer leveled sound. "Ready?" He nodded like someone who realized later honesty would mean less than honesty right now. A muted ticker scrolled earlier. Students refusing civics homework asked whether good citizen includes harming others legally. No mention of Granger, yet the question's origin was obvious. The red light blinked on. There was nothing left to outsource. No graphics, no badge. Faded blue shirt. "I thought I was doing right," Malloy began, eyes off camera. Maybe finding Granger's stillness, I followed protocol, spoke the trained language, filed correctly, believed that excluding emotion made me a good cop. Silence stretched, uncomfortable enough to be listened to. A tech behind glass glanced away. Some confessions are quiet, yet difficult to sit through. Sometimes leaving emotion out is the mistake, he continued. Emotion recognizes the human, not the subject. He looked into the lens, neither apologizing nor arguing, like reporting a crime scene within. I stopped him, Because I couldn't reconcile the man and the car, the steadiness and my training's expectation that calm equals concealment. He repeated unspoken expectations like engraving the phrase into himself. The producer sensed analysis masquerading as poise, a man dissecting his dual role, perpetrator and exhibit, on tape. I didn't yell or strike, he added, but I placed him somewhere I'd never place myself, his hands flattened on thighs, balancing a three-legged chair. A hallway clatter, folding chairs stacked, pulled his eyes to the door. A tiny break viewers would later freeze because authenticity can't be reenacted, not even to apologize effectively. I'm not asking forgiveness, he said, unscripted. The producer didn't cut. I hope the next generation won't mistake empathy-free action for justice. He stopped. It's not enough, he whispered. I don't know what else to say. 4 minutes, 32 seconds, no overlays, no hashtags. Within days, law schools, judicial trainings, academies requested the raw file, not to sensationalize, to teach. In Northern California, a professor paused the frame and asked one question. Does he feel remorse? No, a student said. Neither do I, the professor replied. We don't need sorrow. We need courage not to lie about what we did. Nobody took notes. The class stood and left, carrying it bodily. No banners followed, no marches, no trend lines. Society shifted like tide without surf, washing away structures mortared by willful blindness. Everyday habits reoriented quietly, the way driftwood reveals the current, long before charts reflect it. In Tennessee, a teacher mispronounced a black student's name. Nobody laughed, nobody corrected. The student wrote, I am not your mispronunciation. The image traveled, captioned by others. He doesn't need to be called right. He must not be called wrong. On Oregon plates, tiny 3D printed fedoras appeared, echoes of Granger's hat. No movement claimed it. Souvenir shops ran empty. Residents printed replacements. Soft-spoken symbols whispering, I saw, I won't look away, attaching memory where stickers once bragged. Nebraska court clerks shifted scripts, not what's your name, but what would you like me to call you properly? Subtle, overdue. For lives misnamed by systems, it felt like architecture moving toward people instead of demanding they shrink into forms. In Chicago, a professor screened Granger, sitting silently in the back row. Write how a person changes a room without speaking. No rubric. Pens moved, not for grades, but to ensure memory wouldn't evaporate into commentary's churn. A New York cafe posted, We don't serve by numbers. We call your name correctly. Beside it, a drawn notebook and pencil, silent emblems. Anyone who'd watched the clip understood remembrance expressed through ordinary accuracy, not commemorative plaques. Inside departments, nuance breached habits. Minneapolis Nights added, Can I confirm the spelling of your name? To citations, barely slowing time, drastically enlarging attention. Writing about people, not just incidents, began where ink meets dignity. In Des Moines, an elderly man cried when asked to confirm spelling. His citation carried his dead son's name. Not malicious, still wounding. The commander handwrote policy, never let someone's name be mistaken for one they've already lost. Chicago supervisors required reflections after reports, not to grade feelings, but to see that papers don't merely document others' errors, they mirror ours. A rookie wrote, I'm not detached when they look like they might disappear. The room listened. Malloy learned through strangers' eyes now. Not in uniform, he wasn't feared, but neither trusted. People regarded him like an old ink stain on good paper, too small to tear out, too large to write over confidently again. He entered his old cafe. No one ejected him. The barista avoided his eyes, skipped the loyalty card question. When the cup arrived, it read, Wishing you a peaceful day. No name, only a phrase for heavy crossings. Granger granted no interviews, no memoir, no speeches. He declined his name for campaigns. People mentioned him indirectly, by choosing back rows, carrying notebooks, insisting prevention over performance. Resistance became guarding lines so certain harms never recur. The tiny hat spread from hospitals to precinct lots to teacher parking. No directives, no commerce. A generation quietly exchanged rituals, choosing gestures that finally called things their rightful names. Not an ending, an opening chapter. In Illinois, a teacher wrote "good citizen" on the board. A boy asked, if someone follows rules but hurts people, are they still good? No curriculum waiting. The classroom held still, adults and children knowing the real lesson just arrived. She wrote 3 words, hurt, but legal, taped over the plan. We'll discuss this, she said, maybe all week. The principal, passing, heard fragments and emailed faculty. If today looks like yesterday, don't call this a school. Maplewood canceled quizzes, roll call, homework, only 30 minutes of quiet writing. If I make someone sad without consequences, am I right? If law permits harm, do I grow like law or like good? A police parent asked the teacher next morning, have you ever scared someone and not been punished? She showed handwritten pages. He didn't argue. A week later, he requested curriculum revisions, writing, I once believed I was good. My kids shouldn't doubt it. A publisher posted 1 page, shaky pencil on wrinkled paper. If the right thing makes people quiet, is it still right? No caption. 700,000 shares in a day. Professionals with answers interrupted by a child's ungraded inquiry. The questions were archived, then sent to a national council, adopted for teacher training. No cameras, no podiums. 3 major papers published full scans, untitled, beneath a single line. They didn't ask about Granger. He's why these questions exist. A 30-second phone clip from outside Maplewood showed a teacher reading, if I follow rules and someone still cries, whose fault? 2 million views, profile photos turned blank, symbolizing questions needing pause more than prepackaged answers. Schools began unwritten questions, periods monthly, not graded, not optional for teachers. The point wasn't solutions, it was refusing multiple choice where humanity lives. Students practiced seeing, naming, and holding harm without bureaucratic shelter. Michigan's first session drew 200 students. A third grader asked, if I see unfair blame and my teacher is silent, should I grow up quiet? Administrators didn't answer. They rewrote the staff handbook, first revision in 20 years. In Texas, parents protested, fearing tradition eroded. Then a second grader, officer's daughter, told local TV, Dad asks not just my points, he asks if someone was treated badly today. The backlash evaporated. Participation quadrupled in 3 days. At a statewide reform summit, an elder professor stood. Law guides avoidance. Morality prevents harm where law permits it. A 1L posted the 80-second clip captioned, Save this for the day. Someone brave revised his own definition. Ethics classes replayed it next term. Even students indifferent to civics watched. Many recognized themselves. Legally right once, morally wrong nonetheless. Beneath photos, small hands gripped worn pencils under scrawled lines about feeling, names, and harm. At Granger's office, a paper mailbox appeared. Letters from elementary kids. I know who you are, one wrote. I want to grow up not hurting anyone without someone stopping me. No addresses. Writing it down was enough. About then, Malloy got notice. His son requested 2 school days off. Reason, I don't want to sit under the name everyone says at recess. It came from Malloy's phone. The boy had used the family account. It wasn't truancy. It was sheltering from a foundation he thought solid. Now only a picture, fragile as trust. The message landed as Malloy left a meeting introducing mandatory ethics retraining and recorded self-evaluations for flagged officers. A colleague whispered, who wants to tape their face, admitting what they once denied? Malloy answered nothing. His son's message echoed like footsteps in an unlit hallway, pulling him out of the building before explanations could harden. He drove home. No child running to ask, Did you catch anyone today, Dad? The house felt unfamiliar. On the table, a civics notebook, a page edged red. What if someone who protected me later frightened others? He recognized his son's slight left-leaning script. The boy sat silent, clutching a pillow. Malloy asked, "Have you read the news?" It wasn't for information, only hoping the boy hadn't seen every version available. "Yes," the boy said, "but I didn't need news." He slid over a printed headline. Elderly black man ordered to raise hands by Officer Malloy. The photo's eyes looked past camera, directly at Malloy's cruiser, questioning protection itself. Malloy wanted to burn it. Fire couldn't undo what changed in memory. He clenched fists from habit, not anger. The boy whispered, "You told me good people don't make others afraid just by entering rooms. Why did that man stand like that?" There was no training module for it, no statute required, only integrity, missing right then. "I didn't think I was wrong," Malloy said, the sentence collapsing like scaffolding in heavy wind. Between them the quiet thickened. Not tears, but vacuum, where trust used to sit. Files on the table bore Granger's name, highlighted red. "You wrote he disrupted protocol," the boy said, checking reality, not accusing. Malloy stiffened, seen uncomfortably. The boy nodded once, closing a chapter gently, not reopening it. "You don't need to explain," he said, steady. "You were good at your job. Sometimes doing a good job isn't doing the right thing." Malloy reached for familiar words, justice, ethics, duty, and found them hollowed by misuse. The boy's phone lit with another clip. "I learned law from the officer who stopped my dad. Ethics when my father couldn't meet my eyes. No names posted." Malloy recognized the colleague's child anyway. His own son rose, no slam, no tears, closed his door like folding a page you don't tear, don't burn, just decide never to read again. Malloy walked the hall differently afterward. On the fridge, an old drawing. Father and son both in uniform. Caption, "When I grow up, I'll be like Dad." He folded it into the drawer that once held his sidearm. He sat alone. No tribunal, no cameras, only the verdict that matters, the one in a child's eyes. A role rescinded, father as model, by the person he once hoped would inherit his better pieces, not his blind spots. Sunrays cut across his sleeve. Behind the closed door, stillness wasn't rebellion, it was distance. Meanwhile, across the state, Granger climbed the steps at Northwind University's conference center beneath a banner honoring 30 years of reform. His name on the guest list surprised nobody. His arrival surprised everyone. For months, he'd declined everything, living like a sentient still life, appearing where presence mattered, quiet, forcing recalibration without forcing anyone's speaking schedule. Auditorium volume sank when he entered, fedora angled, pencil in pocket. Federal leaders planned that if he refused to speak, they'd skip to awards, a silent tribute. 10 minutes after he arrived, awards felt redundant and were canceled. He ignored the podium despite repeated invitations, stood third row, hand on a chair back, eyes lifted to the banner. Reform doesn't start with systems. It starts when systems learn to listen. He gave it weight by standing. His gaze rested on a front row politician who dismissed systemic concerns as emotional overreaction. The man paled, not from fear, but from recognition. A look without office can vaporize the illusion that everything is fine. Granger approached the microphone by the side aisle. A live stream trembled. The camera operator held breath. Within minutes, 50,000 viewers posted only one symbol, a dash. Silence traveling noisily across screens like a bell. People refused to mute. The mic was live. Backup scripts waited. He spoke once. "At this point, who among you still believes I didn't know is acceptable?" Not accusing, just ringing. A room full of titles confronted the cost of curated ignorance. He didn't wait for applause, didn't bow. He left through a bright corridor. No one called him back. Everyone knew if you must ask twice, you're unprepared for the answer that's already inside you. No viral fireworks followed, just one sentence migrating through legal forums. Elias O. Granger. No bouquet, no speech, one question, then gone. A Massachusetts law school printed it on graduation folders, needing no context to justify presence. In Kentucky, a newly promoted captain pinned a note. Any report claiming I didn't know must include why you didn't try to know. Not a threat, an invitation to the longest overnight meeting on redefining knowing as responsibility. Since North Wind, nobody spoke of Granger the old way. Newspapers stopped front paging him. Programs stopped courting interviews. His presence didn't fade. It distributed, showing up as changes that didn't require his name to travel. In Wisconsin, identifying characteristics vanished from stop forms, replaced by, did the individual feel discriminated against? No legal teeth, only reflective ones. Writing it required looking again, not at features, but at whether authority became an instrument of harm. A decorated veteran officer froze mid-shift, unable to complete a line he couldn't answer without looking inward. An internal recording leaked. I'm not sure I've ever made someone feel less than human. It spread as an unofficial oath. In Carolina, a faculty board debated a portrait. Granger declined. Don't frame a person if their work helps others unframe themselves. A blank whiteboard replaced it, inviting students to write what they once thought unimportant to relearn. A year later, it was dense with different hands. A scholarship senior stared 30 minutes, wrote nothing. Because I haven't yet dared to change the thing I need to, he explained. Finals shifted, asking courage instead of merely knowledge. Exam prompt. Have you ever seen someone write and chosen not to stand with them? Explain. No correct answer. 1/3 left blanks. The board reconvened, not to grade, but to recalibrate the program's moral threshold altogether. In legal circles, precedent-resistant hypotheticals got nicknamed Granger bench questions, cases that require acting as though nobody watches. Some protested attaching a name to moral stumbling blocks. A closed hearing reframed the stakes with one senator's line. Whom would you prefer we fail? The not clever or the clever missing humanity? Silence won. The name stayed. Exams nationwide shifted from what if you find misconduct to what if there's no proof and your compass still alarms. In a federal coordinating office, a document titled Bias-Aware Communication Standards landed. A senior supervisor asked, "Must we formalize emotion?" An investigator set down his pen. I once met a man whose quiet changed rooms. You know who. A journalist scheduled for a feature series declined. I can't profile him. He turned every subject inward. The letter leaked. Debates flared. Can press narrate stories it previously ignored? Writers began publishing pieces about transformations, not protagonists. At a national debate tournament, organizers screened Granger seated in back. The prompt, how many failed to see before cameras forced noticing? Arizona's team ended with 30 seconds of backs turned. A judge wrote, the first wordless persuasive speech. A retiring professor left no party, only a draft reform repeatedly rejected for being too emotional. This final submission carried, I don't need thanks. I need to stop conscripting silence. The note lived above the courthouse copier. Granger stopped weekly office visits, moved to a quiet suburb. Mornings, you could hear notebook pages lift and breeze. He registered for nothing, wrote publicly nowhere, yet people referred to him anyway, by the changes they'd made. The one who rewired my reports, who made me meet students' eyes when saying their names, who showed me silence is an answer. At a Kansas used bookstore, a chair appeared beside law, carved lightly, not for fame, for rethinking. Visitors sat briefly, then left slips of paper, truths they'd never said aloud. Granger never asked for homage. What remained was harder to dispute. Not accomplishments, but a standard that travels without stamps, labels, or spotlights. He became structure, silence compelling self-speech in institutions allergic to mirrors. In outskirts where he ended meetings, hearings, applause that never mattered, A nameless road ran through eucalyptus. Each morning he walked it, notebook folded inside his shirt. Locals noticed a shadow stretched long. Nobody requested autographs. Few said his name. Not forgetfulness, fitness. Remembering him. The old way felt unnecessary. Remembering through behavior felt closer to the point he'd insisted on wordlessly. TV segments moved on. No person of the year, no ceremonies, no lists. Yet courthouse hallways shifted, registration desks softened, traffic stops began with names said properly. Nobody cited Granger precedent. Everyone behaved as though he was freshly mentioned. Far east, a teacher asked, "Who's your hero?" A boy refused names. Someone who says nothing and makes others start saying the right things. Pressed, he answered, "No one." People who question themselves, even uncalled out. It didn't reach the honor board. The page taped to the door all year read like a proclamation. Sometimes the greatest lesson isn't the event, but the space afterwards, where behaviors settle into truer shapes. No farewell, no ribboned medals. Leaving his office the final day, Granger's secretary found a notebook open to a blank page with one angled line. "If it must be retold, it hasn't sunk deep enough." The notebook wasn't displayed, no QR. It sat, evidence accusing nobody, yet refusing everyone's escape. The unasked question lingered. How long did we stay quiet before one person had to speak for a whole system? Reform reports began including a novel chart, not success rates, but behavior changes triggered by awareness rather than rules. Analysts nicknamed it the reflection marker, plotting pauses when people redirected mid-action because they finally recognized recipients' experience. No one mentioned Malloy anymore. The clip retired. What mattered wasn't lodged in video. It appeared when people stopped lowering eyes around uniforms. Eye contact returned. Not challenging, not submissive, just level conversation no longer beneath law. At an education summit, debate arose. Should Granger's name enter textbooks? A professor said quietly, "Better not." Faces puzzled. If students learn him from text, we failed to make his work live in teaching. The proposal passed. His name stayed off pages. Classrooms changed. Morals modules ditched slogans for scenarios that ended with, "If you aren't wrong legally, but someone feels harmed, should you repeat it? Explain," with next time commitments. Granger never wanted to rewrite history, only stop reruns. That doesn't require a narrator, because if this story needs telling, what remains becomes performance, not the difficult transformation it demands across desks and dashboards. So it doesn't need retelling. Yet here you are. If this reached more than your scrolling finger, if a corner of you stirred, don't let it fade into content. Leave a line, not polished, just honest. Have you felt your silence become complicity, seen dignity misnamed, or simply want to say, "I understand"? Each share multiplies useful space, showing the once silent they aren't alone, and the once certain they might begin listening. We make these pieces for more than views. We make them because small correct tellings shift how people see themselves. If that matters to you, amplify. Help keep difficult truths illuminated, not archived for seasonal rediscovery. You're helping truth breathe. That's enough momentum for us to continue. Not with brass bands, just with chairs set out, names spoken carefully, forms rewritten, pauses taken, questions asked before harm, and questions kept when comfort beckons too quickly. Behind headlines and hearings, the work is calendars and mirrors, dates to meet, and reflections to face. Granger's question survives. Who still believes "I didn't know" is acceptable? The answer isn't syllables, it's conduct measurable by strangers. Malloy keeps showing up, scheduling forums, stacking chairs, writing names correctly, declining microphones. His son watches, sometimes from the doorway, sometimes from the driveway, deciding whether the old drawing might unfold again someday, uncreased. Departments revise forms, classrooms collect unwritten questions, courts swap portraits for blank boards, neighborhoods thread tiny hats onto plates. None of it fixes everything. All of it interrupts old habits long enough for newer ones to root. Granger walks that eucalyptus road at dawn, notebook folded, listening to breezes turn pages. He doesn't need to write. The page remembers the hand, the town remembers the posture, the system remembers the pause, if it wants to last. Across Monroe, kids practice bike tricks, parents correct homework on curbs, officers start stops by confirming names. Ordinary life remains the goal, unstartled, unstartling. So dignity feels routine, not commemorative, and apologies get replaced by verifiable habits. The old welcome sign still hangs, promising law and trust. Maybe it's earned again, line by measured line, with fewer excuses and more receipts. How we knew, why we changed, who checked, and when we'll check again. If you're waiting for orchestral closure, it won't arrive. This story ends the way repair lives, unfinished, continuous, tracked by reflection markers and children's questions, by pocketed pencils and chairs in circles, instead of podiums proclaiming easy victories. Somewhere, a rookie drafts a report, pauses over the line, felt discriminated against, and decides to ask another question aloud. Somewhere, a teacher chooses names as the week's lesson. Somewhere, a captain edits a policy from memory to practice. Somewhere else, a parent admits at the dinner table, I should have spoken sooner, and a kid keeps eating, nodding, trusting differently. These aren't headlines, they're hinges, small quiet changes turning heavy doors. People assumed we're fixed forever. A clerk rewrites an intake script. A teenager prints a hat charm on a friend's old 3D printer. A journalist kills a flattering profile to write about systems instead of saviors. The work keeps refusing celebrity. Monroe learns to breathe with fewer flinches. The wind that once cut impatiently now threads steady through cracked slogans remade by conduct. The crack remains, visible, instructive, no longer stepped past, finally examined, deliberately avoided, henceforth. If you want to measure progress, don't count views. Count names pronounced correctly, questions left open, reports rewritten mid-sentence, kids who choose no hero, officers who narrate steps, and rooms that straighten when someone sits quietly in back. Granger's name appears nowhere hereafter by design. He preferred not being framed. He preferred standards built into corners where nobody looks for plaques, corners like form fields, hallway scripts, and the moment before lights flash behind your car. If you meet him, you might not know. You'll know the places he's been by what they refuse to say. I didn't know. That phrase is retired here, like a jersey nobody dares reissue. If you've read this far, perhaps you've paused once. That pause matters more than slogans. Keep it. Share it. Not as content, but as conduct. The next right small act before the next easier wrong. Leave a comment if it helps you commit. Tell someone you changed a script today. Ask a colleague harder questions. Refuse to celebrate speed without accuracy. Replace instinct with articulation. Replace posture with presence. Replace knowing with learning. Amplify if amplification builds room for those who risked questions first. Subscriptions aren't salvation, they're scaffolding, useful while the building remakes itself. We'll keep arranging chairs, posting schedules, publishing reflection markers you can audit openly, because truth breathes better in company, because silence can either smother or shelter, because one man's stillness asked whether I didn't know survives inspection, and enough of you answered with changed behavior to keep the question alive. Some will say this is sentimental. Let them. Sentiment didn't revise policies, people did, guided by feeling sharpened into structure. If you need a proof, bring your mirror and calendar. Measure again next month with someone you trust. In the ledger that matters, entries read oddly, names said right, questions left standing, pauses practiced, hats printed, portraits skipped, boards written on, drafts unsent, excuses retired. Add your line. You're already holding the pencil. If your line is small, good. Systems rebuilt by small, inspected joints survive earthquakes better than monuments polished for cameras. Right behavior that outlives comment sections then test it beside people who'd notice slippage first. When the next stop happens, let it be ordinary. When the next forum meets, bring chairs, not podiums. When the next class begins, start with names. When the next article publishes, count conduct, not clicks. Repair prefers repetition. If you're new here, welcome. If you've been here, thank you. Continue anyway. Without needing gratitude, the work's reward is quieter neighborhoods, steadier nerves, and fewer children learning ethics from their parents' lowered eyes at dinner. We'll keep making these, less for spectacle, more for scaffolding. If they help you pause, keep them. If they move you to act, share them. If they do neither, leave them, and listen harder nearby. And if this felt like more than headline fodder, say so, briefly, honestly. Someone who's been quiet might need your sentence to risk their own. The chorus grows one unscripted line at a time, never perfectly in rhythm. Help us keep telling what's worth telling because telling tills ground for doing. Help us keep space open for voices long dismissed. Help us keep the fire small, steady, useful, warm enough for courage, safe enough for truth. You're helping truth stay alive, where policies meet people, where reports meet names, where pauses meet choices. For us, that's reason enough to keep going. Pencils sharpened, chairs in circles, and doors finally learning how to open. Lesson 1. Dignity isn't a favor, it's the floor. If you've lived long enough to watch the news change from black and white to high definition, you know this. Justice doesn't keep itself. It needs caretakers. The morning in Monroe made that truth plain. An elderly black man, steady hands, felt hat, a Lincoln as old as some of our grandchildren, was pulled over for matching a hunch rather than a law. The officer called it instinct. Our generation has a different word for it: profiling. Only later did he learn the driver was Justice Elias O. Granger, a man whose signature helped steer the law through hard seasons most folks would prefer to forget. But here's the point older Americans can hear with painful clarity. This never should hinge on fame. A person should not have to be celebrated to be seen. For those who remember bus boycotts, church basements, and quiet courage, the images in Monroe sting and ring familiar. The flowers in the trunk, the small wooden box with a name worn into it, the judge's calm that didn't beg and didn't bluster. It simply waited for the system to recognize itself. The officer had his phrases: reasonable suspicion, unusual behavior, non-compliant tone. But the judge had presence. That presence exposed the gap between procedure and decency. Many of us were raised to trust uniforms and robes because of what they represent. The older we get, the more we learn that symbols have to be backed by conduct, or the cloth turns flimsy. The first lesson is simple and hard. Dignity is not something authority grants. It's something authority must never violate. I didn't know is not a defense when the harm is a human being, standing right in front of you. Lesson 2. Change that lasts looks boring on TV, but it works. Our age group understands committees, audits, and ledgers better than most because we've served on them. After the stop, the real work didn't look like a movie. It looked like calendars and mirrors, meetings in school gyms with folding chairs in a circle, not a podium. Policies rewritten so discretion doesn't float loose without receipts. New forms that ask not only what happened, but whether the person felt discriminated against. Dashboards the public can actually read. Promotion criteria tied to accuracy and harm reduction, not just how many stops an officer can rack up before lunch. If you sang in the church choir or kept a union hall running on time, you know the power of repetition, habits that season a community. That's what grew in Monroe. Officers began to start with names and narrate each step. Here's why I stopped you. Here's what happens next. Do you have questions? It sounds small to someone 65 or 75 who remembers the knot in the stomach when a patrol car rolled by. It is not small. It is the distance between panic and breath. And while social media hunted for heroes and villains, wiser heads kept counting what really matters. Fewer unlogged stops, fewer gaps in recordings, more corrections made in real time. The second lesson is unfancy and therefore easy to overlook. Change that sticks looks like maintenance. It's measured by what you can check, not what you can cheer. Perhaps the most humbling piece for our generation is admitting how often silence helped wrong things survive. Thought someone else would act isn't just a line, it's a habit. In Monroe, that excuse finally ran out of air. Mid-level emails surfaced, not monstrous, just comfortable. Don't intervene without a formal complaint. Many of us have heard a version of that sentence at work, at school boards, in city offices. We know how it protects the wrong people and exhausts the right ones. Communities didn't ask for heads, they asked for hands, on clipboards, on checklists, on doors opening at the right times. That's how you rebuild trust sturdy enough for your grandkids to grow up under. Lesson 3. Repair is repetition, practice, not performance. Older readers have a finely tuned ear for empty apologies. We've watched decades of them. In Monroe, the better path took root: plain language, public updates, and a refusal to confuse volume with virtue. We failed Justice Granger. We failed many of you. We'll measure change where you can see it. That's not poetic, it's adult. It's what you say when you're ready to be held to something besides your intentions. The officer at the center did a hard thing most of us won't ever do on camera. He told the truth about himself without angling for sympathy. He named the gap between feeling professional and being humane. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He asked for the next generation to stop equating emotionless action with justice. That admission won't fix the past, but older Americans know that growth that starts late can still bless a family. We've seen fathers and mothers change. We've been those parents, those supervisors, those church trustees who finally chose the longer route, write the letters, set the meetings, show the receipts, and keep going when applause fades. Repair spread in 1,000 quiet ways. Teachers starting with correct names, clerks asking, "What would you like me to call you properly?" Captains requiring that any report citing "I didn't know" also explains why you didn't try to know. None of that looks dramatic. All of it is moral ballast. And yes, it is deeply American, because our best traditions are the ones that convert ideals into daily routines. So the third lesson is where many of us live now. Practice over performance. If you want to measure progress, don't count views. Count how many stops begin with an explanation, how many forms get corrected mid-sentence, how many meetings use circles instead of stages, how many children stop learning ethics from their parents' lowered eyes. Count the number of times we retire the comfortable excuse and pick up a pencil instead. That's work you can do at 65, 75, or 85, steady as a heartbeat. Conclusion: what we leave behind. The sign at Monroe still promises law and trust. Our legacy is to make those words true in the quiet ways that outlast headlines. Names said right, questions asked before harm, policies that withstand bad days, and a culture where "I didn't know" is finally replaced with "I learned." And here's the proof. For those of us who have seen America wobble and right itself, this isn't nostalgia. It's duty, paid in steady installments. Keep the calendar, keep the mirror, keep the pause. That's how dignity becomes ordinary. Friends, if this story stirred something in you, I'd love to hear your voice. Where have you seen "I didn't know" used as a shield? And what small, steady change could replace it in your town, church, school, or precinct? If you're 60 plus, tell us one habit from your generation worth bringing back today, and one we should retire for good. Drop your thoughts below. Like this video if it helped you pause, and subscribe to the channel. Our next conversations will share practical checklists and real examples you can use, not just ideas. Your comment might be the nudge someone needs today.